The midday sun beat down mercilessly on the lot of Three Pines Lumber Company in rural Montana, just outside of Kalispell. The temperature had to be pushing 95 degrees, and the air shimmered with heat waves rising from the packed dirt. Among stacks of Douglas fir logs and rusted machinery that had seen better days, the old 1983 Volvo N10 rested like a monument to abandonment, a forgotten relic of harder times and better days. Its faded blue paint was barely visible beneath the thick layer of red dust and dried pine needles that had accumulated over 5 long years. The rear tires, deflated and cracked from exposure to Montana's brutal winters and scorching summers, had sunk deep into the dirt, creating small craters that filled with water when it rained. Weeds had begun growing around the wheel wells, as if nature itself was slowly reclaiming what man had abandoned. The windshield, covered with an opaque film of grime, bird droppings and tree sap, reflected only the distorted image of clouds drifting lazily across the big sky. Inside the cab, visible through the dirt-streaked glass, the leather seats had cracked and faded, and the dashboard was covered in a thick layer of dust that made it look like an archaeological artifact, rather than a working vehicle. Marina Volkert pulled her weathered F-250 pickup alongside the wooden gate and stepped out with a notebook tucked under her arm and a worn leather tool bag slung over her shoulder. At 34, she carried the weight of 3 generations of mechanics in her broad shoulders and calloused hands, hands that had torn down and rebuilt more engines than most men twice her age. Her grandfather, a German immigrant named Klaus, who had fled Europe after World War II, had opened the first diesel engine shop in the region back in the 1950s, working 16-hour days to build a reputation for honesty and expertise. Her father, Dieter, had expanded the business to include heavy machinery maintenance, agricultural equipment, and eventually mining equipment when the copper mines opened up north. And as an only child, Marina had transformed Volkert's garage into a regional authority on trucks and tractors. Despite the skeptical looks she received at every agricultural fair she attended, despite the snide comments from old-timers who thought a woman had no business under a hood, despite the customers who'd drive an extra 50 miles just to have a man work on their equipment. The whispers of, "What's a woman doing here?" had long since stopped bothering her. She let her work speak for itself. And it spoke loudly. Farmers who'd initially balked at having her work on their combines now wouldn't trust anyone else. Truckers who'd laughed when she first opened her own shop now lined up for her services, knowing she could diagnose problems other mechanics missed. "So this is the Volvo you folks want to sell for scrap metal?" she asked Mr. Adamson, the lumber company owner. He was a robust man of nearly 60, with a graying beard that hadn't seen a barber in months and a faded Montana State Cooperative's baseball cap perched permanently on his head. His flannel shirt had seen too many washes, and his work boots were caked with sawdust. "Yep, Marina, it's been sitting here for about 5 years now," Adamson replied, his voice carrying the weight of resignation and old grief. He pulled out a red bandana and wiped sweat from his forehead. "My brother Walter, God rest his soul, was the last one to work on this beast. After he passed, nobody wanted to touch it. Felt like bad luck, you know, like the truck died when he did." He spat tobacco juice on the ground and adjusted his cap, a nervous habit Marina had noticed in their phone conversation. "3 mechanics have already been out here. All of them said the same damn thing. Blown engine, seized pistons, cracked block, not worth rebuilding. Would cost more to fix than to buy a newer used truck. One of them wouldn't even open the hood, just walked around it once, kicked the tires, and told me to call the scrapyard. Charged me $50 for the privilege of that advice." Marina walked slowly around the truck, her boots crunching on the gravel, observing every detail with the practiced eye of someone who understood that machines often told stories their owners had forgotten. She ran her hand along the faded paint, feeling the rough texture of oxidation and neglect. The lumber bed, handcrafted from local hardwood by someone who knew their craft, showed cracks along the sides from years of heavy loads and harsh weather, but the structure still appeared fundamentally solid. The joinery was expert-level work, mortise and tenon joints that would last another 30 years if properly maintained. The mirrors hung broken, dangling by their cables like dislocated limbs. The running board was bent, probably from someone stepping on it wrong when climbing into the cab. One of the headlight lenses was cracked, and both turn signal covers were missing entirely. But something about this Volvo called to her, a kind of presence that good trucks carry, even after years of abandonment, a quality she'd learned to recognize over the years. It was like they were sleeping rather than dead, waiting for someone who understood them to wake them up. "Can I take a look inside?" she asked, already reaching for the door handle, feeling the hot metal burn her palm. "Be my guest, but I'm warning you, I've already wasted too much money on hope," Adamson said, shaking his head. "Spent nearly 10 grand over the years trying to keep it running before Walter got sick. If you think there's no fixing it, I'll accept that. Been fooling myself long enough. I'm ready to sell it by weight and be done with it. Use the money to fix the damn forklift that actually makes me money." The door creaked open with a sound like a wounded animal, its hinges protesting 5 years of disuse, releasing a cloud of dust that made Marina cough and step back momentarily. The interior smelled of mildew, dried rubber, mouse droppings, and the peculiar musty odor of abandonment, a smell she knew well from other resurrection projects. The driver's seat had cracked leather with yellowed foam exposed, springs poking through in places. Someone had tried to patch it once with duct tape, but the tape had dried and peeled away. The thick, worn steering wheel, grooved with the wear pattern of thousands of hours of driving, still bore the Volvo emblem in its center, a circle with an arrow, the ancient symbol of iron and the Roman god Mars. Marina sat down carefully, feeling the seat springs press unevenly beneath her weight, hearing them squeak and groan. She placed her hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, feeling the smooth wear pattern where Walter's hands had rested for countless miles, imagining how many roads this truck had traveled, how many tons of lumber it had hauled through the mountains of Montana in all kinds of weather. How many sunrises had Walter watched through this windshield? How many late nights had he driven, pushing to make one more delivery to earn one more paycheck? On the dusty dashboard, all the gauges were frozen in time like stopped clocks, speedometer stuck at 211,147 miles, fuel gauge empty, temperature gauge dead at 0. The odometer couldn't tell the whole story, though. This truck had lived several lifetimes in those miles. Mountain passes, logging roads, winter ice storms, summer dust clouds. She noticed a faded photograph taped to the sun visor with yellowed duct tape, a man in blue Dickies coveralls, younger and healthier, smiling proudly next to the gleaming Volvo on what must have been delivery day, sometime back in the 1980s when Reagan was president and diesel was cheap. "That's my brother Walter," said Mr. Adamson, who had approached the truck quietly, his voice softer now, touched with emotion. He loved this rig more than anything except maybe his wife, Sarah. Bought it brand new in '83 with money he'd saved for 10 years. Said it was the best truck he'd ever owned, better than the Kenworths and Peterbilts he'd driven for other people. This one was his. Nobody could take it away from him. It was his independence, his pride. Adamson's voice caught slightly. When it stopped running in 2019, he tried everything to fix it. Spent weeks out here after his regular runs, working by flashlight, ordering parts from all over the country. But he couldn't get it going right. Got sick shortly after, lung cancer, probably from all the years breathing diesel fumes and sawdust. Doctor said it was stage 4 when they found it. And the Volvo just sat here like it had died along with him. Sometimes I swear I can still hear him out here, cursing at this engine, promising he'd figure it out. If you appreciate stories about perseverance, second chances, and the value of seeing what others ignore, please hit that like button and subscribe to Underrated Mechanics. Share in the comments where you're watching from, and tell us about someone you know who never gives up, even when everyone says it's not worth it. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories of restoration and redemption. Marina climbed down from the truck carefully, her boots finding purchase on the bent running board, and walked to the front with renewed purpose. With considerable effort, using both hands and leverage from her legs, she managed to pop the stuck hood release and pry open the hood itself, which rose with a prolonged metallic groan that echoed across the lumberyard. The hydraulic supports had long since failed, so she had to prop it open with a length of 2x4 that was lying nearby. The TD100 engine, a 6-cylinder inline 10-litre diesel, one of Volvo's most legendary power plants, known for running 1,000,000 miles if properly maintained, sat there filthy, covered in a thick layer of grime, with dried oil seeping from various joints like dried blood from old wounds. Broken belts hung like cobwebs, and the air filter housing was missing its cover entirely, exposing the element to years of dust and debris. But beneath all that neglect, Marina could see something others had missed. The engine was surprisingly intact. There were no obvious signs of cracks in the block, no smell of catastrophic failure, no visible holes or broken components. The exhaust manifold wasn't warped. The turbocharger, though filthy, was still bolted in place. She ran her hand over the cylinder head, feeling the cold surface of the cast iron. Years of experience had taught her that engines rarely lied. People did, but engines didn't. She pulled out her flashlight and began a systematic inspection, checking oil passages, looking for signs of coolant contamination, examining the condition of visible gaskets. Everything pointed to an engine that had simply stopped running, not one that had destroyed itself. The oil on the dipstick, though ancient and thick, didn't have metal shavings. That was a good sign. "Do you have the key?" she asked, already forming a hypothesis in her mind. Mr. Adamson pulled a rusty key ring from his pocket, sorting through several keys before finding the right one. "Here, haven't turned it in years. Stop trying after Walter passed." Marina returned to the cab, brushed off the seat with her hand and sat down again. She inserted the key into the ignition, noting the worn cylinder, and turned it only to the preheat position without engaging the starter. Just enough to activate the electrical system if it still worked. She watched the dashboard intently, waiting, hoping. Nothing. Not even the click of the starter relay, not even the glow of warning lights, not even the familiar hum of the fuel pump priming. The gauges remained dead, frozen in time. Complete electrical failure, or something simpler. She went back to the engine bay and began following the battery cables with her eyes, tracing their path like a detective following clues. The cables were heavily corroded, covered in that white blue-green powder that accumulated on old connections, but they were still physically connected to the battery terminals. The battery itself was clearly dead, no surprise after 5 years, but that wouldn't explain everything. She checked the main fuses in the weathered fuse box mounted on the inner fender. Most were oxidized, their metal caps showing green corrosion, but none appeared blown. The fusible links near the starter looked intact. She wiggled connections, looking for looseness or breaks. Then, as she leaned deeper into the engine bay, her flashlight beam caught something that made her pause. She looked closer, moved some wiring harnesses aside, traced a fuel line with her finger, and then she saw it. A detail so simple, so absurdly basic, that she almost laughed out loud at the incompetence or malice it represented. "Mr. Adamson," she called out, her voice carrying an edge of excitement. "Do you have a good battery here at the lumberyard? And some clean diesel fuel?" The old man approached, curious about the change in her tone. "I do. Got a couple of new interstate batteries for the forklift, and there's fresh diesel in the tank out back. Why? You find something? What if I told you this engine probably isn't blown?" Marina stood up, wiping her greasy hands on her jeans, leaving dark smears. Adamson frowned, his weathered face showing deep skepticism born of disappointment. "Marina, I already told you. 3 mechanics looked at this truck. 3 professionals who've been working on diesels longer than you've been alive. No offense. They all said 3 mechanics who didn't look carefully enough, she interrupted, her confidence growing with each word. She pointed to a specific spot deep in the engine compartment, where 2 rubber fuel lines connected to the injection pump. Come here, I'll show you something. Bring your reading glasses. Bam, the detail everyone missed. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, those colors that make Montana famous, when Marina finally finished connecting the cables from the new interstate battery that Mr. Adamson had brought from the maintenance shed. She had spent the last hour and a half cleaning connections with a wire brush and contact cleaner, checking circuits with her multimeter, testing relays and solenoids, and most importantly, investigating that crucial detail that had caught her trained eye, the detail that 3 other mechanics had somehow missed. "Look here, Mr. Adamson," she said, gesturing for him to lean in close. She pointed to the fuel return line where it connected to the injection pump. "See this rubber hose? The black one with the metal clamps?" The man approached, pulling out the reading glasses he kept in his shirt pocket and putting them on, squinting into the engine bay. "I see it." "So what? Looks like a fuel line to me. What am I missing?" "It's reversed, completely backwards." Marina traced the path of both lines with her finger, showing him the flow direction. "Someone at some point, and I'd bet money I know when, switched the feed line with the return line. See how this one goes to where that one should go, and vice versa. The diesel was trying to enter the injection pump from the wrong side. It's like trying to drink through your nose instead of your mouth. Technically possible for a moment, but your body isn't designed for it." She stood up, stretching her back, which ached from bending over the engine. "The engine didn't blow, Mr. Adamson. It simply never received fuel properly. It probably started a few times. These old mechanical injection pumps are tough. They can sometimes pull fuel backwards through sheer force. But it would have run rough, suffocated, lost power, blown black smoke. And everyone would have assumed there was a serious internal problem because it ran so poorly. The symptoms would have mimicked a dying engine, low power, rough idle, hard starting, when really it was just choking on its own fuel system." Mr. Adamson removed his cap and scratched his head, his thin grey hair matted with sweat, processing the information slowly. His face went through several expressions: confusion, understanding, anger, and finally, something like hope. "So, you're telling me this truck has been sitting here for 5 years, and I almost sent it to the crusher because of switched hoses? 2 damn hoses put on backwards?" "More or less. But there are other issues too. I'm not going to sugarcoat it." Marina pulled out her notebook and began making a list. The battery was completely dead, obviously. These injectors are probably clogged with varnish. Fuel turns to varnish when it sits too long. The fuel filter has probably turned to stone. You can't use it. All the rubber fuel lines are dried out and cracked, not just these 2. The glow plugs are probably corroded in their threads. The coolant looks like rust soup. The engine oil is beyond old. It's practically solid. She paused, looking at the engine with an expert's eye. "But you know what? Look at the compression in these cylinders. I can tell just by how easily the engine turns over by hand. Feel this." She had Adamson put his hand on the harmonic balancer while she rotated it with a breaker bar. "Feel how even that is? No tight spots, no resistance that shouldn't be there. That's good compression, consistent across all 6 cylinders. This TD100 is practically indestructible when it's properly maintained, and Walter clearly maintained it well before whatever happened. But how did this happen?" Adamson's voice carried a mix of confusion and rising anger. Walter knew this engine like the back of his hand. He could practically rebuild a diesel in his sleep. He wouldn't make a mistake like this. He was too careful, too experienced. Marina wiped her hands on a shop rag, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know for certain. Sometimes when you're tired, stressed, desperate, working in bad light, you can make mistakes. We're all human. Or, she paused meaningfully, someone else worked on it. Someone who either didn't know what they were doing or knew exactly what they were doing. The implications hung in the air between them, like the dust motes visible in the late afternoon sunlight. The important thing right now, Marina continued, is that this has a solution. This truck can be saved. It's not the lost cause everyone thought it was. A glimmer of hope appeared in Mr. Adamson's tired, red-rimmed eyes, the first real hope she'd seen since she arrived. How long would you need? And be straight with me. I can't afford to throw good money after bad anymore. I've got a business to run, employees depending on me. Marina pulled out her phone and opened her calculator app, doing quick mental math. If I work steadily, properly, not rushing but not dragging it out either, about 2 to 3 weeks for a complete mechanical restoration. But it's going to need parts, and they won't be cheap for a truck this old. New fuel lines throughout, fuel filters, engine oil and filter, coolant flush and fill, battery you've already got, glow plugs. Those alone are expensive and they might break off when we try to remove them, which means we'd have to extract them. Complete overhaul or replacement of the injection pump, and that's not cheap. Testing and cleaning or replacing all injectors. New belts, new hoses, fresh diesel with additives to clean out the system. She looked at her notes. Parts and supplies, I'm estimating around $4,000, maybe $5 if we run into complications. Labor, I usually charge $75 an hour, but for Walter's truck, I'll do it for $50. Figure 60 hours of work, maybe more, so $3,000 in labor. You're looking at $7,000 to $8,000 total, possibly more if we find problems once we're inside. Adamson's face fell slightly. That's a lot of money for a truck that might not even be worth $10,000 running. True, Marina acknowledged, but it's a hell of a lot less than buying another truck, even a used one. And there's something else to consider. This truck means something. It's not just transportation, it's Walter's legacy. It's proof that he wasn't wrong, that he wasn't losing his touch at the end. And sometimes, Mr. Adamson, that's worth more than the dollars and cents. The old man looked at the Volvo, then at the ground, then back at Marina. You really think you can do this? Marina looked at the Volvo, then at Walter's photo, still visible through the dirty windshield, his young, hopeful face frozen in that moment of pride from 1983. I know I can, but I have one condition. What's that? That you let me bring my nephew Tyler to help. He's 17, finishing his senior year at Flathead High School, and everyone in the family, my dad, my mom, his parents, they all want him to go to college for business administration or accounting or something practical with a future, something where he wears a tie to work. She smiled. But the kid loves engines. I mean, really loves them. Stays up watching rebuild videos on YouTube, can identify engine sounds better than most mechanics I know. He's got the gift, and he loves heavy machinery especially. Trucks, tractors, earth movers. I want him to see a project like this from start to finish. I want him to learn that sometimes the biggest reward isn't money, it's bringing something back to life that everyone else gave up on. Mr. Adamson extended his hand, rough and calloused from decades of lumber work. Deal. When do you start? Tomorrow morning, first light. I'll need to get my tow rig set up tonight. We'll bring a flatbed. This truck isn't going to roll on its own yet, and I don't want to damage anything trying to tow it conventionally. That night, Marina drove back to Kalispell as the sun disappeared behind the pine forests that covered the mountains, painting them in silhouette against the darkening sky. Her garage, Volkert's diesel and heavy equipment repair, sat on the outskirts of town on a 2-acre lot she'd bought 10 years ago when she'd finally saved enough for the down payment. It was a large metal building, 40 by 60 feet, with 16-foot ceilings to accommodate farm equipment. The concrete floor was stained with decades of oil and grease, marked with the evidence of 10,000 repairs. A fenced lot surrounded it, where 3 trucks awaiting service sat alongside a John Deere tractor with its transmission completely disassembled on a work table. A farmer had ignored the grinding noises until second gear had exploded, and now Marina was piecing it back together like a mechanical puzzle. As she parked her F-250, she saw her nephew Tyler sitting on the concrete step outside the office door, scrolling through his phone but immediately looking up when he heard her truck. The kid practically lived here after school and on weekends, choosing her garage over parties and football games and all the things other kids his age were doing. Tyler stood up eagerly. He was lanky and tall, still growing into his frame, with perpetually disheveled dark hair and hands that were already permanently stained with grease, no matter how hard he scrubbed them. He wore a faded Carhartt jacket and work boots that had seen better days. "Hey, Aunt Marina, where's this Volvo you went to see? Did you get it? Is it as bad as they said? Tomorrow morning we're going to get it." Marina stepped out of her truck with a tired smile on her face, feeling the long day in her back and shoulders. "And you're going to learn how to resurrect a TD-100 from the dead." Tyler's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Seriously? For real? But I thought you said on the phone that it was completely toast, that everyone said it was finished." "I said everyone thought it was finished. I said 3 mechanics had condemned it." Marina grabbed her tool bag from the truck bed. "But you know what I discovered, Tyler? Something I want you to remember for the rest of your life, whether you become a mechanic or not." "What?" She put her arm around his shoulders as they walked toward the garage. "I discovered that sometimes, more often than you'd think, the difference between junk and a masterpiece, between trash and treasure, between something worth saving and something worth scrapping, is all in the details that people choose to see or ignore. Most people look at a problem and see reasons to give up. Good mechanics look at a problem and see possibilities. That's what separates us." They entered the garage where Marina flipped the heavy-duty light switches and the space was flooded with bright fluorescent light. The familiar, comforting smell of oil, grease, solvent, and clean metal filled the air. A smell that Tyler had loved since he was old enough to walk, when his aunt would let him help by handing her tools. On the walls, tools hung organized on pegboards. Every socket, every wrench, every specialty tool in its designated spot. On the main workbench, half-finished projects lay in organized chaos, stacks of technical manuals and service bulletins piled high, and a large commercial coffee maker that was always on, always hot, the lifeblood of long repair nights. "Aunt Marina, can I ask you something?" Tyler's voice had that serious tone that meant he'd been thinking about something for a while. "Always. You know that. Why did you take this job? I mean, you've got waiting lists. You've got people calling from 3 counties away, wanting you to work on their equipment. You could probably charge twice what you charge, and people would still pay. Why waste time on an old beater from 1983 that's been sitting dead for 5 years? Why not focus on the newer stuff that pays better and is easier to fix?" Marina stopped organizing tools and turned to face her nephew fully, giving him her complete attention. This was important. This was the kind of question that revealed whether he understood what being a real mechanic, a real craftsperson, truly meant. "Because that old beater, as you call it, represents something important, Tyler. That truck carried dreams, it paid bills, it fed a family. It was a man's pride and independence, and because there are too many people in this world who think that when something breaks you just throw it away and buy another one. Just trash it, send it to the crusher, move on to the next thing, use it up and dispose of it." She sat on her work stool, her voice passionate now. "But I learned from your great-grandfather, Klaus, a man you never got to meet but whose blood runs in your veins, that repairing something, restoring something, bringing something back from the edge of destruction, that's more noble than discarding it. It takes more skill, it takes more patience, it takes more heart." Any fool with a credit card can buy something new. It takes a real craftsman to make the old new again. Tyler listened intently, absorbing every word. And there's something else, Marina continued. That Volvo has a story, it has history, it has character. Some jackass mechanic, and I'm pretty sure I know what happened now, either made a terrible mistake or did something deliberate to that truck. And because of that, a good man spent the last months of his life thinking he'd failed, thinking he'd lost his touch, thinking maybe he was getting too old, too sick, too confused to even fix his own truck. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine how that must have felt? Tyler shook his head slowly. Well, I can, Marina said firmly. And if we can get that engine running again, if we can prove that Walter wasn't losing it, that he wasn't incompetent, that his beloved truck wasn't the piece of junk everyone said it was, then we're not just fixing a machine. We're fixing an injustice. We're restoring a man's honor, even if he's not here to see it. We're proving that truth matters, that skill matters, that caring about quality and integrity and doing things right still means something in this world. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, then he smiled. The kind of genuine, understanding smile that showed he'd just received an answer to a question he'd been asking himself for a long time, without even knowing it. So, tomorrow we bring it here? Tomorrow at sunrise, Marina confirmed. Wear your work boots and bring gloves. This is going to be dirty, hard work, but it's going to be important work, the kind of work that matters. When the past surfaces, the next morning dawned cold and clear in Kalispell, with that dense fog that rose from the river and covered the fields like a grey blanket, limiting visibility to maybe 30 yards. The temperature hovered just above freezing, and frost covered everything, windshields, grass, fence posts, in a delicate white coating that sparkled when you hit it with light. Marina and Tyler arrived at Three Pines Lumber Company at exactly 7 a.m., their breath visible in the cold air, followed by Tommy Rodriguez, an old friend from Marina's father's generation who operated a heavy-duty recovery service. He drove a customized Mercedes-Benz tow truck fitted with a powerful hydraulic boom and a flatbed that could handle vehicles up to 15 tons. Tommy had pulled more stuck, broken and abandoned vehicles out of more impossible situations than anyone else in northwest Montana. "Morning, Marina!" Tommy called out, stepping down from his truck. He was a stocky man in his late 50s with a thick mustache and a ready laugh. "So this is the famous dead Volvo I've been hearing about? The one everyone says is impossible to fix?" "That's the one. And it's not impossible. Just neglected and sabotaged." "Sabotaged? What, you think someone did something to it on purpose?" "I'm starting to think exactly that, but I'll know more when I get it torn down." Mr. Adamson was already waiting for them, standing next to a makeshift table with hot coffee and thermoses and a spread of food his wife had prepared. Fresh biscuits with homemade jam, scrambled eggs wrapped in foil to stay warm, thick slices of ham, and fresh fruit. "Figured you folks would need fuel for working," he said. "My Martha insisted on feeding you properly." As they ate, standing in the cold morning air and grateful for the hot coffee, Mr. Adamson watched Marina and Tyler work with Tommy to prepare the Volvo for transport. They moved with practiced efficiency, communicating in the shorthand of people who'd worked together, Marina and Tyler at least. Tommy had been recovering vehicles since before Tyler was born, and he worked with the calm confidence of someone who'd seen and moved everything. They positioned the truck carefully, adjusted heavy chains around the frame, not the body panels or bumpers, but the actual structural frame members, and checked and double-checked every connection point. Marina was fanatical about proper rigging. She'd seen too many vehicles damaged during recovery because someone took shortcuts. "Careful with the rear suspension," Marina warned as Tommy operated the hydraulic controls. "It's been compressed under its own weight for 5 years. Those springs are going to unload when we lift it, and they might be rusted. Tyler, stay clear of the wheel wells." "Got it, Aunt Marina." The kid stood back, watching every move, mentally cataloguing every step of the process. This was how you learned, not from books or videos, but from watching masters at work and asking questions. As the Volvo's front wheels slowly left the ground, the hydraulic boom groaning slightly under the load, Mr. Adamson spoke up, his voice thoughtful. "You know, Marina, I was thinking about what you said yesterday, about how someone might have done something to this truck, about how those fuel lines got reversed." Marina turned to face him, her interest sharpening. "Yeah? Well, I remembered something last night. Couldn't sleep thinking about it." He pulled out a faded baseball cap and worried it in his hands, a nervous gesture. "About 6 months before Walter died, maybe 7, there was a mechanic who came out here from Billings. Fancy guy, drove a brand new Silverado, had business cards, the whole deal, called himself a diesel specialist, said he worked with a big dealership." Marina felt her pulse quicken. What was his name? Silverton. Robert Silverton, or maybe Richard. Started with an R, I'm pretty sure. He showed up at our lumberyard saying he'd heard through the grapevine that Walter was having trouble with his Volvo and that he specialized in older European diesels. Said he could fix it for sure. And Walter hired him. Walter was desperate by that point. The truck would start sometimes but ran terrible. Black smoke, no power, rough idle, exactly what you described yesterday. He'd already spent weeks trying to fix it himself, ordering parts, replacing sensors, adjusting the injection pump timing. Nothing worked. So when this Silverton character showed up promising he could fix it, Walter jumped at the chance. Mr. Adamson's face darkened. Paid him a fortune, $8,500, which was every cent Walter had saved toward buying a newer truck. Silverton worked on it for 2 days, replaced a bunch of parts, charged for premium labor rates, and swore he'd fixed it. And you know what? The damn truck did start, ran for maybe 5 minutes, then died and wouldn't start again. Silverton made excuses, said it needed time to cycle through the system or some bullshit, collected his money and left. Promised he'd come back if there were any problems, but when Walter called him a week later, the number was disconnected. "Jesus," Tommy muttered, securing the last chain. "That's cold." Tyler looked at his aunt. "Aunt Marina, so that's when the hoses got switched? When this Silverton guy worked on it?" Marina's jaw tightened, anger building in her chest. "Had to be. Walter wouldn't have made that mistake. He knew diesels, and the timing is too perfect. Guy works on the fuel system, truck runs worse, hoses are backwards. That's not coincidence." "But why?" Tyler asked. "Why would someone do that on purpose? What would he gain?" "Money, maybe," Tommy suggested, lowering the Volvo onto the flatbed and beginning to secure it with more chains. "Get paid for the job whether it works or not, or maybe someone paid him to sabotage it," Marina finished grimly. "Mr. Adamson, did Walter have any enemies? Anyone who would benefit from his truck being out of commission?" The old man was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "You know, there was something. Walter did a lot of lumber hauling, not just for me, but for other mills in the area. He had good relationships, fair prices, always on time. There was this one outfit out of Billings, a big operation called Mountain West Timber. They wanted to monopolize all the hauling contracts in this part of Montana, offered to buy Walter's truck and hire him as a driver, but he refused. Wanted to stay independent. After that, they started undercutting his rates, bad-mouthing him to potential customers, saying his truck was unreliable." Marina and Tommy exchanged glances. "And then, mysteriously, his truck became unreliable," Tommy said. "Mr. Adamson," Marina said carefully, "do you still have any paperwork from when Silverton worked on the truck? Receipt, invoice, anything?" "Should be back at the house with Walter's files. I kept everything. His wife Sarah didn't want any of it, too painful, so it all came to me. Let me check tonight." "Please do, because if what I'm thinking is right, this wasn't just incompetence. This was deliberate sabotage, and somebody needs to answer for what they did to your brother." The drive back to Folkert's garage took 40 minutes, Tommy driving carefully with his precious cargo, keeping it under 45 milliliters on the winding roads. Marina and Tyler followed in the F-250, both quiet, lost in their own thoughts about what they'd learned. When they finally turned into the garage lot just after 9 a.m., a small crowd had already gathered. Curious neighbors, a couple of Marina's regular customers who'd heard through the grapevine about the Volvo rescue, and even old Joe from the ranch next door who claimed he'd never seen a dead truck saved that had been sitting that long. "What a heap, Marina," Joe called out, shaking his head as Tommy carefully backed the flatbed into position. "Does that thing still have an engine in it, or did someone steal it for scrap?" "It's all there, Joe. And it's going to run better than that piece of junk GMC you drive." "Bullshit. I'll bet you a steak dinner at the chop house that thing never turns over." "You're on," Marina said with a grin. "Medium rare." As soon as Tommy had the Volvo positioned in the main bay and unloaded, with Marina paying him $300 for his services, the real work began. First priority was a thorough cleaning. Inside, outside, underneath, everywhere. You couldn't properly diagnose or repair what you couldn't see, and this truck was covered in 5 years of accumulation. They started with the exterior, using Marina's commercial-grade pressure washer, blasting away the packed dirt, the bird droppings, the pine pitch, the moss that had started growing on the north-facing panels. The water was ice cold, and Tyler's hands turned red even through his work gloves, but he never complained. 5 years of neglect slowly washed away, flowing across the concrete floor toward the drains, revealing the true condition of the paint and body. "Look at this, Aunt Marina," Tyler called out, pointing to a metal plate welded to the side of the lumber bed. The pressure washing had revealed letters stamped into the aluminum. "Walter 3 Pines Transport, serving Montana since 1983. Marina paused what she was doing and walked over, running her hand over the plate, feeling the raised letters, the quality workmanship that had gone into it. He must have had this made special when he bought the truck new. This was his pride, Tyler. His declaration to the world that he was someone, that he mattered, that he was a professional. Can you imagine how he felt when he thought this truck, this symbol of everything he'd worked for, was finished? That's why it's so important we get it running, isn't it? It's not just about the truck. It's never just about the truck, kiddo. It's about what the truck represents. It's about justice. It's about proving that Walter was right to be proud of this machine. It's about showing that he wasn't losing his mind at the end, that he wasn't incompetent, that someone deliberately hurt him. Tyler nodded, understanding more with each passing hour what this project truly meant. Marina stepped back and looked at the sky, where the morning fog had finally burned off and the sun was starting to warm things up. "You know, Tyler, there's something your great-grandfather Klaus, my grandfather, used to say when I was about your age and just starting to learn this trade." "What's that?" "He'd say, 'Marina, engines don't lie. People lie, salesmen lie, politicians lie, even mechanics sometimes lie. But engines tell the truth. If you know how to listen, if you know how to look, an engine will tell you exactly what happened to it, exactly what's wrong with it, exactly what it needs." And he was right. This Volvo is telling us a story right now. It's telling us that it didn't die of natural causes. It was murdered. Tyler looked at the truck with new eyes, seeing it not just as a machine, but as evidence, as a witness to a crime. "And you know what else?" Marina continued. "If we can make this engine run again, we're not just resurrecting a truck, we're resurrecting the truth. We're giving Walter's memory the justice it deserves. We're proving that lies don't last forever, that truth eventually comes out, that good work and honest effort are worth fighting for." The stories engines tell. That afternoon, while they continued the cleaning process, Tyler working on the interior, vacuuming out years of dust and mouse nests and wiping down every surface. While Marina tackled the engine bay with degreaser and detail brushes, Mr. Adamson showed up with a worn cardboard box, the kind that copy paper comes in. "Found it," he announced, holding up the box. "Everything from Walter's truck. Receipts, service records, registration papers going back to '83, even the original purchase agreement from the Volvo dealer in Missoula." Marina wiped her hands on a shop rag. Never quite clean, always stained with the evidence of her profession, and took the box. "Perfect, let's see what we've got. They went into the small office attached to the garage. A cramped space with a battered desk, a filing cabinet, walls covered with calendars from parts suppliers, and a coffee maker that had seen better days. Marina cleared space on the desk and started carefully removing items from the box, laying them out like an archaeologist organizing artifacts. Service records showing regular maintenance, oil changes every 5,000 miles, injector service, valve adjustments. Walter had been meticulous. Registration renewals every year without fail. Insurance documents, fuel receipts showing thousands of dollars spent over decades. This truck had been his livelihood, his independence, his pride. And then, buried under a stack of old registration cards, she found it, a yellowed invoice on letterhead that read, "Silverton and Sons Diesel Service, Billings, Montana, servicing commercial vehicles since 1995. Marina read it carefully. Service date, March 15th, 2019. Customer, Walter Adamson. Vehicle, 1983 Volvo N10. Complaint, engine runs rough, black smoke, loss of power, hard starting. Work, performed. Replaced fuel supply lines, worn. Replaced fuel return lines, cracked. Replaced fuel filter, adjusted injection pump timing. Replaced glow plugs, 4. Cleaned injectors. Parts, 3200. Labor, 16 hours. Rev 285 HR, 4,560 $. Shop supplies, 150 $. Total, 7,910. Paid in full, cash. Marina photographed the invoice with her phone, capturing every detail, then looked up at Mr. Adamson and Tyler, who were watching her intently. $285 an hour for labor, Tyler said, his eyes wide. "That's insane! You charge $75 and people say you're expensive." "That's because he was robbing Walter blind," Marina said, her voice hard with anger. "And look at this. Replaced fuel supply lines and return lines. That's when he switched them, right there. Either through incompetence so profound he shouldn't be allowed near a wrench, or deliberately, which means this was premeditated sabotage." "Can you prove it was deliberate?" Mr. Adamson asked, his face pale. "Can you prove he did it on purpose?" "Not yet, but I'm going to find out." Marina pulled out her phone and did a quick search. "Silverton and Sons Diesel Service. Let's see what we can find." After a few minutes of searching, she found a business listing, last updated in 2020, showing the company as permanently closed. But there was a phone number. She called it, not expecting an answer. After 4 rings, a man's voice answered. "Yeah, is this Robert Silverton? Who's asking?" "My name is Marina Volkert. I'm a diesel mechanic in Kalispell. I'm working on a Volvo N10 that you serviced back in March 2019 for a man named Walter Adamson." There was a long pause. "I don't remember every truck I work on, lady. I think you'll remember this one, the one where you reversed the fuel lines, the one where Walter paid you nearly $8,000 and the truck ran worse after you left than before you started." Another pause, longer this time. "I did the work I was paid to do." "Really? Because what you did, whether through incompetence or on purpose, that truck sat dead for 5 years, and Walter Adamson died thinking he'd failed, thinking he was losing his touch, when really he'd been sabotaged. So I'm going to ask you one time, Mr. Silverton, did you reverse those fuel lines deliberately?" She could hear breathing on the other end, hear what sounded like someone moving around, a door closing. Look, Silverton finally said, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. I can't talk about this. I was hired to do a job. Not by Walter, by someone else. They paid me to make sure that truck didn't run right, paid me good money, more than I made in a month of legitimate work. I needed it. My business was going under. I had debts. I had child support I couldn't pay. I'm not proud of it, but that's what happened. Marina set her phone to speaker so Mr. Adamson and Tyler could hear and started recording. Who hired you? I can't. Mr. Silverton. A man died thinking he was a failure because of what you did. His brother has spent 5 years believing that truck was worthless. You owe the truth. Who paid you to sabotage Walter Adamson's truck? She heard him sigh, a sound of defeat and resignation. Guy named Harrington, Richard Harrington. He might still run, a big timber hauling operation out of Billings called Mountain West Timber Transport. Said Walter was undercutting his prices, taking his contracts, and he wanted him out of business. Paid me $5,000 cash to make the truck unreliable enough that Walter would give up trucking. I wasn't supposed to kill it completely, just make it run bad enough that he'd sell it cheap or junk it. And you did it. I did it. And then I heard a few months later that Walter had died. Cancer. And Look, I closed my business after that. Couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. What I did, sabotaging a man's livelihood like that, destroying his pride, it was wrong. I know that now. I knew it then, but I did it anyway, because I was desperate and weak. Are you willing to put that in writing? To testify if necessary? To who? The cops? I'm pretty sure what I did was a crime. I'm not going to jail for something that happened 5 years ago. Mr. Silverton, if you don't come clean, I'll make sure every mechanic in Montana knows what you did. Your name will be mud. You'll never work on another vehicle as long as you live. But if you cooperate, if you tell the truth, if you help us get justice for Walter's family, maybe you can make amends. Maybe you can find some redemption for what you did. There was another long pause. Let me think about it. Give me your number. I'll call you back in a couple days. She gave him her number and he hung up. Marina stood there, her phone still in her hand, shaking slightly with suppressed rage and adrenaline. Tyler and Mr. Adamson stared at her in stunned silence. Holy shit, Tyler finally said. Sorry for the language, but this is insane. Mr. Adamson had tears running down his weathered cheeks, his face a mixture of grief and vindication. My brother was right all along. There was nothing wrong with his skills, nothing wrong with his mind. Someone deliberately destroyed what he loved, destroyed his confidence, destroyed his pride, destroyed his will to fight. For money, for goddamn money and business competition. They killed his truck and they killed his spirit, and 6 months later the cancer took his body. Marina put her hand on the old man's shoulder. We're going to make this right. We're going to get this truck running, and everyone is going to know the truth about what happened. Walter's memory is going to be restored along with his Volvo. I promise you that. Mr. Adamson wiped his eyes with his bandana and stood up straighter, some of the weight of 5 years of guilt and grief lifting from his shoulders. What do we do now? Now? Marina looked out at the Volvo sitting in her garage bay, waiting for resurrection. Now we get to work. We prove that this truck was never broken. It was sabotaged. We document everything we find. We take photos, we keep records, we build a case. And then we bring that Volvo back to life so loud and so proud that everyone within 100 miles knows that Walter Adamson was a damn good trucker. And a damn good man who got screwed over by someone with no conscience and no honor. She looked at Tyler. You ready to learn how to resurrect a murder victim? Tyler grinned, despite the gravity of the situation, feeling the weight and importance of what they were about to do. Let's do this. Over the next 2 weeks, Marina and Tyler worked with focused intensity. Every afternoon when Tyler got home from school, He'd drop his backpack, change into his work clothes, and head straight to the garage. Every weekend, they'd start at dawn and work until dark. Mr. Adamson would stop by every few days, bringing food from his wife, watching the progress, seeing his brother's beloved truck slowly come back to life. The fuel system came first. Marina methodically removed every line, every filter, every component that touched diesel fuel. She photographed the reversed lines from multiple angles, documenting the sabotage. Then she installed all new lines, proper high-quality fuel hose designed for diesel, not the cheap automotive stuff that Silverton had used. New fuel filters, new water separator, complete flushing of the fuel tank, which was indeed full of varnish and debris. The injection pump was next. Marina sent it to a specialist in Great Falls who'd been rebuilding Volvo injection pumps for 40 years. When it came back, it looked brand new, every tolerance perfect, every seal fresh. She taught Tyler how to time it properly, how to adjust it for optimal performance. The injectors were a challenge. 3 of them were so clogged they were essentially useless, but Marina had them ultrasonically cleaned and tested. The other 5 were salvageable with cleaning. She showed Tyler how to check spray patterns, how to verify that each injector was delivering the right amount of fuel at the right pressure. The electrical system needed complete renovation. New battery cables, new alternator, the old one's bearings were shot, new glow plugs, which did indeed break off in the threads and required careful extraction, new wiring harnesses where the insulation had cracked. Tyler learned to read wiring diagrams, to trace circuits, to test components methodically. The cooling system was flushed multiple times until the water ran clear instead of rust brown. New radiator hoses, new thermostat, fresh coolant. The engine oil, they drained out thick black sludge that looked like tar and replaced it with fresh diesel-rated oil and a quality filter. Throughout the process, Marina taught Tyler not just how to fix things, but why they worked the way they did. She explained injection timing and compression ratios. She showed him how to read engine wear patterns. She taught him to listen to engines, to feel vibrations, to smell problems before they became catastrophic. A good mechanic, she told him one evening as they were replacing the last belt, doesn't just fix broken things. A good mechanic understands the machine. They respect it. They learn from it. Every engine has a personality, Tyler. This TD100, it's a workhorse. It's not fancy, it's not complicated, but it's honest. It does what it's designed to do. When you work on something like this, you're not just turning wrenches. You're honoring the engineers who designed it, the workers who built it, and the people like Walter who depended on it. The cab restoration was Tyler's project. He pulled out the old seat covers and ordered new ones online. He cleaned every surface, fixed the broken door handle, repaired the dome light, replaced the cracked mirror glass. He found Walter's photo, carefully removed it from the sun visor, cleaned the glass, and secured it back in place. When Mr. Adamson saw it, he broke down crying, happy tears this time. The lumber bed needed work too. Some of the hardwood planks were rotten and had to be replaced. Marina found a local woodworker who milled new planks from Douglas fir, matching the original construction. They treated all the wood with linseed oil to protect it from weather. The metal frame got sandblasted and repainted. Finally, after 2.5 weeks of intensive work, they were ready. It was a Sunday afternoon, clear and warm. Marina had asked Mr. Adamson to come by at 3 p.m. She hadn't told him why, just that it was important. When he arrived, he found a small crowd gathered. Tommy, the tow truck driver, old Joe from next door, several of Marina's regular customers, and about a dozen other people from town who'd heard about the Volvo project and wanted to see the outcome. The truck sat in the main bay, gleaming. The blue and white paint had been hand-polished until it shone. The chrome bumpers reflected like mirrors. The lumber bed looked showroom fresh. Through the windshield you could see the refurbished interior and Walter's photo in its place of honor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marina announced, You're about to witness the resurrection of a 1983 Volvo N10 that everyone said was dead. Everyone except one man, Walter Adamson, who knew his truck, who trusted his skills, who believed this machine was worth saving. He was right. He was always right. And what you're about to hear is proof. She looked at Tyler. You want to do the honors? Tyler's eyes went wide. Me? Seriously? You earned it, kid. You put in the hours, you learned the trade. You understood what this means. Go ahead. Tyler climbed into the cab, his hands shaking slightly with nervous excitement. He adjusted the seat, placed his hands on the steering wheel where Walter's hands had been for so many years, and took a deep breath. He inserted the key into the ignition. The new electrical system immediately lit up the dashboard, all the gauges springing to life for the first time in 5 years. Fuel gauge showed full, temperature gauge at cold, oil pressure waiting. He turned the key to the preheat position. The glow plug indicator lit up, those new glow plugs heating the pre-combustion chambers, preparing the diesel for ignition. He waited the full 20 seconds, something Marina had drilled into him. Patience, she'd said. Diesels reward patience. Then he turned the key to start. The starter motor engaged with a healthy whir. The engine turned over once, twice, 3 times. There was a pause that seemed to last forever, but was probably only a second. Then, like thunder rolling across the Montana plains, like a storm breaking over the mountains, like the voice of mechanical gods declaring that death is not the end, the TD-100 roared to life. The sound was magnificent, deep, powerful, steady, a 6-cylinder diesel symphony that spoke of quality engineering and expert restoration. No black smoke, no white smoke, just a faint haze of clean exhaust. The engine settled into a perfect idle 750 RPM, smooth as silk. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Old Joe was shaking his head in disbelief, already reaching for his wallet to pay off his bet. Tommy was grinning and giving Marina a thumbs up. Several people had their phones out recording video. Tyler revved it gently, and the engine responded instantly, cleanly, powerfully. The sound filled the garage, filled the lot, probably filled half the neighborhood. It was the sound of vindication, the sound of truth, the sound of a promise kept. Mr. Adamson stood frozen, tears streaming down his face, his hand over his mouth. Marina walked over and put her arm around his shoulders. Listen to that, she said softly. That's your brother's truck. That's Walter's pride. That's proof that he was never wrong, never incompetent, never failing. Someone took this away from him, but we brought it back, and now everyone knows the truth. Tyler let it run for a full 5 minutes, watching every gauge, monitoring every sound. Oil pressure, perfect. Temperature, rising normally. Charging system, working. No warning lights, no strange noises, no problems. Finally, he shut it off. The silence that followed was profound. He climbed out of the cab, with tears in his eyes too. Aunt Marina, that was incredible. I've never felt anything like that. That, Tyler, is what this job is really about. Not just fixing things, bringing things back to life, making things right. Welcome to the trade, kid. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Underrated Mechanics. Share in the comments where you're watching from and tell us about a time when you or someone you know refused to give up on something everyone else had written off. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more stories of restoration, redemption, and mechanical resurrection. The roar of justice. The next day, Marina got a call from Robert Silverton. His voice sounded tired, defeated, but also somewhat relieved. I've been thinking about what you said, about making amends, about telling the truth. And I'll do it. I'll put it in writing. I'll testify if needed. What I did was wrong, and Walter's family deserves to know the truth. Do you know a lawyer who could help with this? I do. And Mr. Silverton, thank you. This took courage. No, he said quietly. Courage would have been refusing to do it in the first place. This is just trying to be less of a coward than I was 5 years ago. Marina contacted a lawyer in Kalispell who specialized in business disputes and fraud cases. With Silverton's written confession and phone testimony, they had a solid case against Richard Harrington and Mountain West Timber Transport. The lawyer was confident they could pursue both civil damages and potentially criminal charges for sabotage and fraud. But Mr. Adamson surprised everyone. "I don't want money," he said, when Marina explained the legal options. "I don't want a court battle that'll drag on for years. You know what I want?" "What?" "I want Walter's truck on the road. I want it working. I want everyone who ever doubted my brother, everyone who thought he was losing his touch, everyone who pitied him to see that truck running strong. I want Richard Harrington to see it. I want him to know that his sabotage failed, that Walter's legacy survived, that you can't kill truth with lies no matter how hard you try." Marina smiled. "Then that's what we'll do." 3 months later, Three Pines Lumber Company hosted an event that brought together lumbermen, truckers, mechanics, and residents from Kalispell and throughout the region. It was a brilliant Saturday in spring, one of those perfect Montana days when the sky is impossibly blue and the mountains still have snow on their peaks, but the valleys are warm and green. The lumber yard had been transformed into a celebration of local history, working people, and the kind of stubborn determination that built the West. There were food trucks, a local band playing country music, kids running around, and more than 300 people gathered. At the center of everything, gleaming like a jewel, sat the 1983 Volvo N10. It had been freshly detailed that morning, and the blue and white paint practically glowed in the sunshine. The chrome sparkled. The lumber bed, loaded with fresh-cut lumber to show it was working truck, not a museum piece, looked magnificent. A makeshift stage had been set up, and Mr. Adamson climbed up to it, joined by Marina and Tyler. The crowd quieted down, sensing something important was about to happen. "Thank you all for coming," Adamson began, his voice amplified by the PA system. "Most of you knew my brother Walter. Some of you worked with him. Some of you were his friends. All of you knew he was a good man, a hard worker, and someone who took pride in his work." He paused, collecting himself. 5 years ago, Walter's truck stopped running. He tried everything to fix it, spent his savings, spent his time, spent his energy. And when he couldn't get it working, I think something broke inside him. He started to doubt himself, started to think maybe he was getting old, losing his touch, not as sharp as he used to be. And then the cancer came, and 6 months later he was gone. The crowd was silent, respectful. But here's what we found out. Walter wasn't losing his touch. His truck wasn't worn out. Someone deliberately sabotaged it. Someone paid a mechanic to make it fail. Someone wanted to destroy my brother's business, and they didn't care what it did to him personally. A murmur ran through the crowd. Shock, anger, disbelief. But this woman here, Adamson gestured to Marina, she didn't give up. She looked where others didn't look. She saw what others didn't see. She figured out what had been done, and more importantly, she fixed it. Marina Volkert and her nephew Tyler, they didn't just repair a truck. They restored my brother's honor. They proved he was right all along. Applause began to build. And I want to announce something. This Volvo isn't going to sit idle ever again. Starting today, it's going back to work, hauling lumber just like Walter used to do. But here's the thing. Every penny it earns is going into a fund I'm setting up, the Walter Adamson Memorial Fund, to help young people in this region who want to learn skilled trades, mechanics, carpenters, welders, machinists, the kind of honest work that Walter believed in, that he was proud to do. The applause grew louder. Because my brother believed that working with your hands, that taking pride in your craft, that doing quality work even when nobody's watching, that's as noble as anything. And I want his truck to keep teaching that lesson long after all of us are gone. The crowd gave a standing ovation. Tyler was invited to speak next. He was nervous at first, but Marina squeezed his shoulder encouragingly, and he found his voice. When I started helping Aunt Marina with this truck, I was confused about my future. My family wanted me to go to college, get an office job, wear a suit. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not me. What I learned working on this Volvo is that there's no such thing as a small job or a big job. There's just work done well or work done poorly. There's quality or there's crap. There's pride or there's just punch in a clock. He was gaining confidence now, his voice stronger. I learned that attention to detail can be the difference between failure and success, between life and death. I learned that sometimes the biggest problems have the simplest solutions if you're willing to look carefully enough. And I learned that you should never, ever give up on something just because everyone else says it's hopeless. He looked at Marina with gratitude. My aunt taught me that being a mechanic isn't just about fixing things, it's about understanding things, respecting things, honoring the people who built them and the people who depend on them. So I've made my decision. I'm going to technical school for diesel mechanics. And someday I want to have a shop like hers, where we don't just fix what's broken, we save what others give up on. The applause was thunderous. Finally, Marina stepped up to the microphone. She wasn't much for public speaking, but she had something to say. I'm not going to talk long, but I want to say this. We live in a world that throws things away. The phone doesn't work perfectly. Throw it away, buy a new one. The car has problems. Trade it in. Something's old. Must be worthless. Someone's struggling. Must be their fault. She paused, looking out at the crowd. But that's not the world I want to live in. That's not what my grandfather taught me. He taught me that things worth having are worth fighting for. That quality deserves respect. That age means experience, not obsolescence, and that sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is refuse to give up when everyone else already has. She gestured to the Volvo. This truck is 40 years old. Everyone said it was finished, dead, not worth the effort. But you know what? It just needed someone who cared enough to look closely, to think carefully, to work patiently. And now it's better than new, because it has something new things don't have. It has history, it has character, it has meaning. Her voice grew stronger. Walter Adamson wasn't a failure. He was a victim, but today he's a victor. Because his truck lives, because his memory is honored, because the truth came out, and because everyone here now knows that he was exactly what he always said he was, a damn good trucker and a damn good man. The crowd erupted. People were on their feet, applauding, cheering, some wiping away tears. Then Marina did something unexpected. She walked over to the Volvo, opened the door, and invited Mr. Adamson to climb in. This is your brother's truck. You should be the first to drive it. The old man hesitated, then nodded. He climbed into the cab, sat in the refurbished driver's seat, placed his hands on the steering wheel. Marina could see him looking at Walter's photo on the sun visor, could see his lips moving in what might have been a prayer or might have been a conversation with his absent brother. He started the engine. That magnificent TD100 roar filled the air once again, and the crowd cheered even louder. Adamson carefully put the truck in gear and drove it slowly around the lumberyard, making a complete circuit, the engine running smooth and strong, the truck moving with power and confidence. When he parked and shut it off, he sat there for a moment with his head bowed. Then he climbed out, walked straight to Marina, and hugged her fiercely. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me my brother back." In the weeks and months that followed, the story of Walter's Volvo spread throughout Montana and beyond. Local newspapers picked it up. Trucking magazines ran features. A YouTube channel that covered truck restorations did a 30-minute documentary about it that got over 1 million views. Marina's shop became busier than ever. People from 3 states away would call, asking her to evaluate equipment that others had condemned. Her reputation grew as the mechanic who could save anything, who never gave up, who saw possibilities where others saw only problems. But she was selective about what projects she took on. She wasn't interested in restoring show trucks or building hot rods. She wanted to save working machines that still had purpose, that still mattered to someone. Tyler started his diesel mechanics program at the technical college and proved to be their best student. He still worked at Marina's shop on weekends and summers, no longer as an apprentice, but as a real mechanic in his own right. The other students would ask him for help, and instructors would comment on how mature and skilled he was for his age. He'd just smile and say, "I had a good teacher." The Walter Adamson Memorial Fund awarded its first scholarships 8 months after the truck's resurrection. 5 young people received money to study skilled trades, a 17-year-old girl who wanted to be a welder, 2 young men going into HVAC work, a woman in her 30s returning to school to become a machinist after losing her factory job, and a kid who wanted to learn carpentry. At the award ceremony, Mr. Adamson told each of them, "Walter would be proud of you. He believed that honest work done well is the foundation of everything worthwhile in this world." The Volvo kept working. Every week it hauled lumber through Montana's mountains and valleys, its TD100 engine rumbling reliably, accumulating miles, earning money for the scholarship fund. Mr. Adamson hired a young driver named Sarah, named after Walter's widow, who'd passed away 2 years after her husband, and taught her to drive the truck, to maintain it, to respect it. "This isn't just a truck," he told her on her first day. "It's a reminder that truth matters, that quality matters, that the work we do matters. You're not just driving lumber, you're carrying a legacy." In the cab, Mr. Adamson kept 2 photos now, the original one of Walter from 1983 and a new one taken at the resurrection event, Marina, Tyler and Adamson himself standing beside the restored truck, all 3 smiling, united by purpose and by blood that Adamson hadn't even known they shared until this journey began. Because that's what the investigation had revealed. That Adamson was actually Marina's great-uncle, connected through her grandfather Klaus's first marriage. The same German immigrant who'd started the garage had also started Walter's family. The same mechanical gift, the same stubborn determination, the same belief in quality work had flowed through both branches of the family tree, separated by circumstance, but reunited by a diesel engine that refused to stay dead. 6 months after the truck started working again, Richard Harrington's Mountain West Timber Transport went bankrupt. The company had been overextended, had borrowed too much, had prioritized growth over quality, and when the economy shifted, it collapsed. Harrington himself faced civil lawsuits from other people he'd defrauded over the years. Marina took no joy in his downfall, but she did feel a sense of cosmic justice. On the first anniversary of the truck's resurrection, Marina and Tyler drove out to the cemetery where Walter was buried. They'd brought a folder full of photos. The truck when they first found it, the truck during restoration, the truck at the celebration, the truck working again. They left the folder at Walter's grave, along with a small engraved plate that read, "You were right. The truck was good. You were good. We made sure everyone knows." As they stood there in the Montana sunshine, Tyler asked his aunt, "Do you think he knows? Do you think wherever he is, Walter knows what we did?" Marina thought about it, about the mysteries of life and death, about legacy and memory, about the way machines could carry meaning far beyond their mechanical functions. "I don't know if he knows, Tyler. But I know this. Every time that truck starts up, every time it hauls a load, every time someone sees it on the road and remembers the story, Walter lives a little bit. Not in some mystical way, but in the way that really matters. His work lives, his standards live, his belief that quality and truth and honest effort are worth fighting for, that lives. And as long as people like you and me are around to fix what's broken, to save what others give up on, to tell the truth, even when lies are easier, well, then people like Walter never really die, they just change form. Tyler nodded slowly, understanding more than just the words, understanding the responsibility they carried, the tradition they were part of, the purpose that gave their work meaning beyond just earning a living. They drove back to Kalispell as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in those impossible Montana colors. Tomorrow there would be other trucks to fix, other engines to resurrect, other battles to fight against a world that too often chose convenience over quality, that too often chose replacement over repair. But today they had done something important. They had proved that giving up was never the only option. They had shown that truth, given enough time and enough determination, would come out. They had demonstrated that skill and knowledge and patience could overcome almost any obstacle. And most importantly, they had brought back to life a machine that everyone else had declared dead. Not because it was easy, not because it was profitable, but because it was right. The Volvo kept rolling. Through summer heat and winter cold, through rain and snow and sunshine, it worked. The TD100 engine that everyone said was blown kept running, accumulating hundreds of thousands more miles, proving every single day that Walter Adamson had been right to believe in it, right to be proud of it, right to fight for it. And somewhere, maybe in memory, maybe in something beyond memory, Walter Adamson was proud too. Proud of the truck that bore his name. Proud of the nephew he'd barely known who'd fought for his honor. Proud of the mechanic who'd refused to accept the easy answer. Proud of the young man who'd learned that real work, honest work, quality work was something worth dedicating your life to. The hum of a well-maintained diesel engine carried across the Montana landscape, not just a mechanical sound, but a declaration that craftsmanship matters, that integrity matters, that people matter more than profits. That truth, though it might be buried for years, will eventually come to light, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the difference between trash and treasure, between hopeless and hope, between death and resurrection, is simply someone who cares enough to look closely, think carefully, and work patiently until the job is done right. The Volvo story became legend in the region. Years later, mechanics would reference it when customers wanted to junk something that could be saved. "Remember Walter's Volvo," they'd say. Parents would tell their children about it when teaching lessons about perseverance. Teachers would use it as an example in classes about critical thinking and not accepting the easy answer. And every time someone heard that diesel engine rumble, every time they saw those blue and white colors rolling down a Montana highway, they remembered, some things are worth fighting for. Some truths are worth uncovering. Some legacies are worth preserving. Walter Adamson's Volvo N10 wasn't just a truck anymore. It was a promise kept, a wrong righted, a truth revealed, and a reminder that the work we do matters, the standards we uphold matter, and the determination to never give up on something worth saving. That matters most of all. The end. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Underrated Mechanics for more incredible stories of restoration, perseverance, and never giving up. Share in the comments where you're watching from and tell us your own story of fixing something everyone else had written off, or of someone in your life who embodies the spirit of never quitting. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories of mechanical resurrection and human determination. Remember, sometimes what seems beyond repair is just waiting for someone who cares enough to look closely. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.